Namaskar. Welcome to the Kashmir Festival organized by Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora in association with I Am Buddha. Today's episode is called Sharada's Daughters, and with the composition of the panel being what it is, do I need to explain why? So on our panel today, we have two artists, Medha Fotedar and Pearl Raina, as well as a singer, Krisha Bhat, and a scholar and inventor, Kashmea Wahi. Thank you for joining us for this discussion, and I want all of you ladies to understand that every movement made towards the preservation of our culture is a symbol of what our ancestors stood for, and in that way, we honored those who came before us. Our ancestors were poets, artists, politicians, kings and high priests, teachers, and lifelong students, and we are simply a reflection of them. I want to start my line of questions and answers with our artists. Medha and Pearl, you both come from the same worlds, but each have your own unique journeys. What was the defining moment in your lives during which you realized you want to be an artist? Pearl, we'll start with you.
So, namaskar. My name is Pearl Raina. I'm 17 years old. And my journey started when I was around 4 years old. My mom noticed my interest towards art, and I started joining an art class, and I created my first oil painting, which was a landscape with a sunset and flowers as a silhouette. And I remember that's still my mom's favorite piece. And I remember that is my first moment where I realized that's really what I wanted to do. So from there, I started focusing on technical artwork. I started getting into landscapes and portraits. And that was a really experimental period in my time where I used different mediums like oil pastel, oil painting, acrylic, soft pastel, color pencil, you name it. And my whole aspect for the beginning of my artistry was skill. So I really excelled specifically in portraiture, and that's still one of my favorite aspects of art, and that's over here actually as well. I started doing famous personalities like Kennedy and Gandhi, and that's really where I started to flourish. And as I was drawing these famous personalities, it was kind of a moment for me where I realized that is what I wanted to do. And I started getting more interested in the reasoning behind the artwork. The reason why I even started with famous personalities was the stories behind it. I would research the famous personality, for example, Gandhi, why he was famous, and then I would do the portrait. So as I started growing, I realized, I wanted to do something more different. So I started caring about the story behind it. And I think a huge part of it was when I was 4, I lived in India with my grandparents. And there they really immersed me in the culture there. And I went to multiple temples and really immersed myself in that area. I used to pray every morning, and that subconsciously really affected me as an artist. So starting, I guess, from there, that's when I really started caring about stories behind the pieces, and it's still in my artwork to this day. So from there, I started creating pieces, especially portraiture, with the meaning behind of it. And I even started going to places like cafes and places like Chinatown, because those places really used to have a story behind it. I was obsessed with that. And I stopped using pictures, for example, and I started creating my own pieces. I think from that point on, it was a lot more conceptual for me. And then I was more obsessed with what is the reasoning behind it. And that's when I started my infatuation with eyes. I was really obsessed with eyes. As you probably heard, eyes are the window to the soul. So I used to focus in the eyes because that really used to tell the story. I think it's really easy to understand what someone is going through just by looking through their eyes. And I also took up inspiration from artists like Frida Kahlo. The way that she depicted, at a young age, it was Frida Kahlo. The way she depicted how she felt, especially through portraiture, that's where I received that. It was really conceptual with her ideas. So as I started doing more portraiture, I realized that is like what I fell in love with. And I think that was the beginning of my journey. And so as I started doing that, I think I started um, showcasing to exhibitions, and then I started creating series, and I was really obsessed with white on black series. And then I started creating what's that called? One of my favorite pieces. I illustrated an Kashmiri Pandit as wearing a turban as the focus of the piece, and around him I depicted various Hindu gods in my conceptual reasoning behind it, and I used gouache. I'm in this constant state of conflict with my religious beliefs, so I tend to focus on my definition of spirituality instead. I possessed a black and white understanding of Hinduism, but as I grew, color was introduced, and that I depict in the surrounding beings around him. I think that the red tika and the white yoni around him represent my Hindu faith. My early religious beliefs were the root cause to my spirituality, so my past beliefs will never disappear. I'm grateful to be born in a Hindu family that taught me the notion of something greater than we perceive. As my spirit strengthens, my understandings of my surrounding higher powers intensify. I wanted to do something more. And so I remember when I was in my art classes when I was younger, um, while I used to wait for guidance from my teacher, I used to help at 7 years old to other students. I used to be like, hey, you should do this. At 7 years old, and they used to be like 12 years old, and I used to teach them almost. Well, I used to get in trouble for it because I was so young. And I think that really resonated with me when I was older. And I recently found out that Pandit means scholar. And I think it was in my blood to really like have this sort of knowledge and teach it to other people, pass down my wisdom. So at the age of 14, I started teaching art classes in my basement studio. And it first started off with summer workshops, and then I began doing classes every Saturday. So during those classes, I would mostly focus on technical aspects. So it would be anatomy, perspective, and still lifes. Now, the whole point of like art is not really technical skill. And so I first wanted them to enhance their technical skill. And then afterwards, I moved on to personal projects. So that would be whatever they wanted to be, whether that would be their favorite Pokemon or favorite show. I would allow them to kind of draw whatever, and especially from their imagination, because I think that's definitely the most important as an artist, because I think I wanted them to flourish not just as a technical artist, but also like in their mind. I wanted them to be a lot more smarter than they actually are. So as I started teaching these things, more students came, and then this kept on going until, of course, the pandemic hit. But this pandemic was a huge flourishing moment for me. I started teaching classes over Zoom, and this is the time where I also started teaching adults. And this is a huge moment for me when I was talking to my student, and she's a lot older than me. She's a mom. And she was thanking me for teaching these classes because she's a healthcare worker. And she was like, I go through a lot, and this is like a huge stress relieving process for me. And that was a huge gratifying moment for myself, because that's when I realized it's also just not about what you create, but why you're creating the piece as well, and the moment that you're feeling. It's a huge outlet for a lot of people. And I remember when she said that, it took me back, and I realized, there's a reason why I'm doing this. And there's a lot of adults who are also in the healthcare system, and it really just releases stress and all negativity. Just draw and forget almost anything. And that was a huge moment for me. And I realized that, I want to teach. I love teaching. I also teach students, and these students, they make me so happy. Younger students, sorry. They're around 5 to 9, 10 years old. And it's so cute when I'm like, guys, I have to end class. And then they're like, no. And it amazes me because they already are in class for so long online and they still want to learn art classes because it's a break during this time, you know? And that was a huge learning process for me. And so as I started doing these, I also taught at Kashmiri Overseas Association. So I taught art classes there online as well. And that was a huge moment for me. I started enhancing abundance like me, their cultural identity. So we drew things like a gongdi, and then I explained what a gongdi is. It's a woven pot where embers would be in it. And we would talk about like the reasoning behind why it's an important, its significance. And it was a really cool thing because these people I relate to, you know, they're like family. And I would teach these things and then they would draw and then I would explain the significance. It was a huge shift in my teaching. And I started moving along also by teaching paint nights. So I taught a paint night for Kashmiri Overseas Youth. And I drew a Sharada in Dull Lake. And we even painted little roses on the sides. And that was a huge moment for me as well because I really had to understand the scenery behind it and the landscapes in order to paint it. So I kind of had to immerse myself in Kashmir, even though unfortunately I've never been there. I had to immerse myself in Kashmir and understand, oh, like when the mountains were like this, the shikara looked like this. A lot of people had shikaras. The lotuses looked like that, the lotus fruit. And it was a huge moment because it was also with the Kashmiri youth. I always was surrounded by younger kids, but this is people my age or older. And I really related to them because they're my age. They understand like this conflict of cultural identity. And I remember teaching this and really relating to everybody and talking to them and talking about Kashmir. And it was just a really good experience. And this pandemic really changed my outlook on art in general and my art experience. So that is my art journey.
Thank you for sharing that with us. Medha, what about you?
Well, my affinity for art basically started when I was in 5th grade or so. So I loved art class, but we usually would only have it once a week. But I remember specifically that I used to do this one piece each year for this dog art competition. And my whole art journey started when I drew something for this dog art competition, and it was a colored pencil piece. And my art teacher surprisingly loved it, and it was a huge surprise for me. And she didn't even she told everyone else, like the other competitors for dog art, about like whether or not they'd be competing or not. But she specifically didn't tell me just to surprise me, I guess. But before 5th grade, I remember it was a time for like selection for our electives in middle school. And my art teacher took me aside and told me that I should take art next year. She thought I had like a talent for it. So I ended up listening to her advice, and I took art. So middle school was a big, there was like a lot of influences in it, especially my teachers. Most of my art journey is influenced by my teachers because they sort of guide me along. And so Miss Awad was my elementary teacher who got me into art. And then I had another art teacher, Miss Wagner and Miss Rucker, and Miss Rucker was like someone who loved abstract art and expression, and she taught me to fully express myself in my art and fully put down my feelings on paper. She didn't at first believe in realism or traditional art. She told us to break out of the box, and that eventually helped my expression as an artist. And so I learned to express myself through this. And this whole affinity for art started growing, especially in this period, because then I would ask my parents for these art supplies and I kept begging for it. And they eventually gave in, even though they were a little hesitant because art supplies can be a little expensive. But I remember my first box of Prismacolor pencils, and it was life-changing for me. So through these like colored pencils, I learned that I have an affinity for colored pencils and colored pencil-based art. As you see, these are both colored pencil pieces. So I eventually got an even bigger box of Prismacolors for my birthday, and I would bring them everywhere in school. Even though it was this giant box of 150 colored pencils, and it was in a tin box, it was very heavy, but I still would put it in my backpack, and then I'd bring it out whenever I could to color. But yeah, so then I entered high school, and I guess this is when things definitely started to change because I wasn't very confident in my art. I would believe that I was at least okay in it, but then high school was the big change because I learned about surrealism, and I even went to this museum exhibition in Chicago, and it was this artist, Ivan Albright, and I will never forget his art. It was very creepy, very eerie, very surreal, and he focused on a lot of dark themes such as decaying and all of that. But the way he used colors and contrast to create such an eerie feeling and surrealism, I loved it, and I wanted to try it myself. So in high school, that's especially when I started getting into surrealism. And I made my one of my favorite pieces, my fish head piece. I don't really have it here because it's being exhibited right now, and due to the pandemic, I can't get it back. But it was basically my fish head. There were fish heads with arms, and it was called Stunted Growth. And I talked about it before, where it was about the stunted growth of people when biases are introduced to them. And I basically got really into the dark insecurities and the demons inside people, and would showcase them through my art, especially through Stunted Growth, where it would showcase how sometimes our beliefs could stunt us from being open-minded or create our static personalities, and would stop us from fully loving one another due to biases and due to prejudice. So but surrealism, that was the first piece, but then I started making more and more, and I made another piece, which was a drawing of a bunch of my classmates, and which was a little hard to get because some people were like, I'm not sure if I want you to draw me. But I eventually got enough people, and I would ask them personal questions, and I would ask them, what's your insecurities? What do you not like about you? And so they would tell me, I don't like my nose. I don't like how my hair looks. And I expressed all of their feelings through the medium of colored pencil, and I made the piece "The Distress of the Cursed," and where it's a piece of all of my classmates' heads with a bunch of hands, and it kind of looks like it's from a zombie movie. But instead of expressing my own feelings, I decided that I should, why not express the feelings of others as well? And that's why I especially focused on the symbolism of hands, like in this piece right here, and how hands could symbolize a bunch of things. Hands could symbolize insecurities. It could symbolize anxiety. It could symbolize, feelings of loss or sadness, basically anything. and it was definitely kind of life-changing for me, because then I even made my own self-portrait here, because it's a little hard to get pictures of people now due to the pandemic. So I decided to draw myself through this piece. And I actually use this piece to exemplify how I feel with my loss of identity with the Kashmiri culture, and how sometimes it feels like I'm disconnecting because I'm a second generation, and how I can sometimes feel at loss. But the thing is that I know I'm connected to my culture, and no matter what, it's always there. I'm always abundant, and I'm a scholar due to that. And I then made like the piece for the KOA auction. It was the kangri, the samba, it was basically the scene behind me, but the kangri seems to be missing. But I painted this originally just for the auction, but then afterwards, like during this process of painting, I felt so connected to the spirituality of my culture, and it was such an enlightening experience. So I actually plan on making more pictures and even colored pencil pictures of these pieces. So through this whole journey, I ended up learning about my affinity for colored pencils and surrealism and spiritualism, but I ended up making a Facebook account with my dad to showcase like a gallery of my art and keep them all in one place so that I don't lose it in the future. But it's been a very enlightening experience.
I think the way that art can move us as people is really fascinating. What I want to know is these teachers that you met in middle school that pushed you towards pursuing art, do you feel like they saw something in you that you didn't necessarily see in yourself at the time?
I definitely think that my self-confidence in art wasn't very high, but I remember there were these pieces that I would absolutely loathe, and I would hate them, no matter how long I spent on it. But then my art teacher would see the value in my art, and she would showcase it anyway, even though I didn't like it. And I said, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to use it?" But they definitely saw some talent in me that I didn't see myself. And that's probably why my art teachers like pursued me to express myself more through my art.
Yeah, people can definitely play a huge role in our growth process, in our journeys. And every journey is met with obstacles. So, what I want to know is what challenges have you faced as an artist, whether in the field of your work or during your personal evolution? Medha, we'll start with you this time.
Well, usually one big obstacle that I always have to overcome before I start any piece is motivation. And it's not really due to the lack of motivation, it's just that I have trouble cultivating it. Sometimes I have so many variations of the same idea that I don't know which one to choose, and I don't know how to start. And I worry that I might mess up and might have to get a new piece of paper, or I'll finish the sketch and then I'll mess up on the coloring, and then I'll have to, it's just a whole lot of anxieties about whether or not I'm going to ruin the piece or not. But usually what I have to do is just, start a rough draft, and the rough draft never has to look good. It just has to give me an idea of what I'm doing, and I'll write down the colors I want and all of that. And usually my rough drafts, they actually look pretty terrible, but it's a planning process. So I might need one or two pieces of paper and just draw a bunch of those ideas, and then whichever one looks the best, and usually it's not the first, I would pick that, and I would go with that, make another piece, another rough draft, but it's fully detailing everything about that one idea. And then I would go on to the final piece. And that's usually how I cultivate my motivations when I'm lost.
Pearl, I know you said that when you do your portraits, you do some research behind the person that you're planning on drawing. What about the rest of your paintings?
I think like Medha, I think there's a reason to each piece and why we draw them. So let me show you this one. This one over here. This is a piece of myself and an octopus is surrounding me. And so I really care about the reasoning behind it. And so that represents all my worries and anxieties and insecurities, like Medha was saying. At one point of my life, I wasn't the most confident, especially in my artwork. I think most artists go through that period. And it represents how I felt kind of suffocated and it was constricting me, like as an artist, and I wasn't able to do much. But even though it was constricting me, this piece, this is part of a series. I'm still smiling because this is a period of my life where I understood that things like this will always surround me, will always constrict me, but I will need to learn as an artist to move on from that feeling and embrace it and understand that there's always place for growth. But yes, when I was younger, I used to research those people because I would draw those famous personalities. But now I just need a story behind why I'm doing it.
And what about your creation process? Medha explained how she'll make different variations of her art and then take those and combine those and make like a final version. What about you? What is your physical process?
Completely. Same thing. Where, like she was saying, the rough drafts are not amazing usually, but it's just a thought process of how I want to look, the composition, the reasoning why. So if it's like a portrait, I guess I will find a self-portrait of myself that I like, make sure that the rough draft kind of encapsulates how I look like, certain things about my features that I have to remember. And, like this octopus, I had to find pictures of octopus and learn how to draw, the suckers on the bottom so that it's the same thing. It's like a rough drawing beforehand to understand what you're going to draw later on.
Now, finally, please show us a piece or two that reflects your heritage or something you regard close to you. And feel free to explain why you made that painting and what it means for you as the artist, because I know that when artists create, there's how it's perceived, but then there's also the intention that went into making that piece. So Pearl, if you want to start us off.
That really encapsulates my identity isn't here, and I spoke about it. I can talk about this one. This one's a sort of old piece. Oh, it's from a while ago. But this is a Kashmiri woman, and she is wearing Kashmiri attire, and she is an old woman. This is from, I think, a long time ago. I was like in 8th grade when I did this.
Medha, we would love to see one of your pieces that reflects either your heritage or something that you hold close to you.
Well, I got this piece right here. It's just a self-portrait, but so it's like I said, it was supposed to symbolize my loss of identity and how the hands of outside culture, how I feel assimilated into American culture, and how I feel like sometimes I lose a little bit of my Kashmiri Pandits myself. But in the end, I know that I am always going to be a Kashmiri Pandit, and that these are just feelings of insecurity and anxiety. But I decided to put it into a piece by drawing myself, and I look a little grotesque, and there are hands like grabbing at me, but the hands are symbolic of what I feel like is being taken away from me, and myself is just, it looks like I've lost pieces of myself, and that's essentially what I feel like and how I expressed myself. So.
Thank you for your time, girls. Moving on, I'd like to shine a spotlight on our resident rock star, Miss Krisha Bhat. So Krisha, you're a singer. Can you talk to us about your greatest musical inspiration, whether it's a particular genre or a singer or an era of music? And feel free to respond in Hindi or whatever language you're comfortable in.
Namaskar to all the viewers. First, I would like to thank GKPD and I am Buddha for making me a part of this Kashmir festival. I feel highly honored to be a part of this. तो मेरी जो म्यूजिक में सबसे बड़ी इंस्पिरेशन है वो है द लेजेंडरी लता मंगेशकर जी। मैं जब 7-8 साल की थी तो मैं बॉलीवुड गाने नए पुराने यूं ही गुनगुनाती थी, रिसाइट करती थी। तो मुझे मेरे मम्मी पापा उनको लगता था कि मैं इस सिंगिंग के फील्ड में अच्छा कर सकती हूँ, मुझ में वो पोटेंशियल है कि मैं इसमें अच्छा करूँगी। तो यहीं से मेरी फिर इंडियन क्लासिकल सिंगिंग सीखने की जर्नी शुरू हुई और मैं जब 9 साल की थी मैंने तब से इंडियन क्लासिकल सिंगिंग सीखना शुरू किया अपने गुरु श्री हेमंत भट्ट सर के पास, जिनके पास मैं अभी भी सीख रही हूँ। तो इसमें कहीं न कहीं मेरे पेरेंट्स ने मुझे बहुत मोटिवेट किया, उन्होंने मुझे इसकी तरफ पुश किया ताकि मैं एक अच्छी ट्रेनिंग लेकर अच्छी सिंगर बन सकूँ और मेरा सपना भी है एक प्लेबैक सिंगर बनने का फ्यूचर में। और तो कहीं न कहीं मेरे पेरेंट्स भी मेरी एक इसमें इंस्पिरेशन है।
That is lovely to hear. What does singing mean to you? Why do you sing? Is it, I know that, that's what you want to do with your life, but do you sing because you're good at it, or does it play a bigger, more important, deeper role than just being what you're talented at?
सो म्यूजिक इट्स अ प्रेयर, ये एक साधना है मेरे लिए। जैसे हम कहते हैं कि जो म्यूजिक की देवी हैं गॉडेस सरस्वती माता, तो मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि मैं इसके थ्रू उन्हें पूजती हूँ और ये मेरी हॉबी नहीं है, ये मेरा एक पैशन है। जैसा कि मैंने कहा था कि मुझे एक प्लेबैक सिंगर बनना है। तो और म्यूजिक ने मेरी लाइफ में बहुत ही बड़ा रोल प्ले किया है। इसी के थ्रू मुझे बहुत लोगों ने जाना है, मुझे सबका आशीर्वाद मिला है, उनकी ब्लेसिंग्स, सबने बहुत प्यार दिया है, अपना एनकरेजमेंट दिया है। और अगर म्यूजिक मुझ में ये टैलेंट नहीं होता, तो मुझे नहीं लगता कि मैं आज यहाँ होती या इतने लोग मुझे जानते या सुनते। तो ये सब म्यूजिक की वजह से ही है जो मुझे आज मैं आप सभी के सामने बोल भी रही हूँ, तो ये भी मेरे टैलेंट की वजह से ही है।
Do you pursue music beyond singing? Do you write any songs or play any instruments?
मैं सॉन्ग्स कंपोज़ तो नहीं करती, पर हाँ, अपार्ट फ्रॉम सिंगिंग मैं हारमोनियम बजाती हूँ। क्योंकि सिंगिंग में जो मेरा हारमोनियम है वो एक मुझे सपोर्ट देता है। इसी से मैं अपने सुर लेती हूँ और जब तक किसी सिंगर के साथ म्यूज़िक ना हो तो वो गाना बहुत फीका लगता है। तो जो मेरा हारमोनियम है वो मेरे लिए एक सपोर्ट है और मैं मतलब इसी के थ्रू इसे और अच्छे से बजाना सीखती हूँ और जब मैं गाती हूँ तो ये हमेशा मैं बजाती हूँ। जो मेरा इलेक्ट्रॉनिक तबला है वो भी मेरे साथ रहता है बीट देने के लिए। तो ये बहुत ही ज़रूरी है सिंगिंग के लिए।
Krisha, we would love for you to perform for us.
Yeah, I'm so excited to perform before you all. तो मैं आप सभी के सामने 2 गाने, एक हिंदी और एक कश्मीरी जो हमारी मदर टंग है, तो उसमें मैं गाना चाहूँगी। तो जो मैं पहला जो हिंदी गाना गाने जा रही हूँ आप सभी के सामने, वो मेरा पर्सनली बहुत मन पसंदीदा गाना है और ये मेरी आइडल जैसा मैंने कहा था जो मेरी इंस्पिरेशन है लता जी उन्होंने उनका गाया हुआ है, तो मुझे उम्मीद है आपको ये पसंद आएगा। लग जागने कि फिर ये हंसी रात हो न हो, शायद फिर इस जन्म में मुलाकात हो न हो, लग जागने के फिर ये हंसी रात हो न हो, शायद फिर इस जन्म में मुलाकात हो न हो, लग जागने हमको मिली है आज ये घड़ियां नसीब से, हमको मिली है आज ये घड़ियां नसीब से, जी भर के देख लीजिए हमको करीब से, फिर आपके नसीब में ये बात हो न हो, शायद फिर इस जन्म में मुलाकात हो न हो, लग जागने पास आइए कि हम नहीं आएंगे बार बार, पास आइए कि हम नहीं आएंगे बार बार, बाहें गले में डाल के हम रोले जार जार, आँखों से फिर ये प्यार की बरसात हो न हो, शायद फिर इस जन्म में मुलाकात हो न हो, लग जागने Thank you.
Wow, Krisha, did you tell us how old you were?
I'm 14 years old.
14 years, and you have such a powerful voice, and those runs you were doing were beautiful. Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your talent with us.
Thank you.
Okay, last but definitely not least, we have Kashmea Wahi with us to talk about her advancements in education and innovation. Kashmea here is a young innovator, having invented her own app that assists people with allergies in finding places to eat, and has been involved in tons of charity work. Kashmea, we want to know what your motivation behind so many achievements at an early age has been.
So thank you so much for that introduction. It's really nice to follow after such talented people with such amazing art and such amazing music. So if I start from the beginning, I think everything kind of started, everything substantial in my life started at around the age of 11, when I just turned 11. So I did a test called the Mensa test, and my motivation for doing that test was very, very limited, to be honest, because it was another academic test I had to do at the same time I was doing kind of my 11 plus exams, which are huge exams here. But it was my mum who pushed me to do the exam. She said it's a great way to kind of just find out how much you know, what your capability is.
And with the amount of focus that Kashmiri Pandit parents put on their children with academics, I did end up doing the test. And very, very luckily, I got 162 out of 162. I remember the night before, actually, my mum was showing me another girl who had gotten the same score. And she said, you can do this. And I think I started crying because I was like, no, mum, this is too much pressure. I can't do it. And she said, well, okay, if you aim for that, even if you don't get it, maybe you'll get into Mensa. I said, no, that's too much pressure. Only the top 1% get into that. I won't be able to do it. And I think that kind of belief that my mom had in me, that I think my community also had in me, is one of my key motivations for being here today. After I did get the Mensa score, because I think I was the youngest girl in Britain to achieve that score, it opened a lot of opportunities for me. So I was given the opportunity to do a lot of interviews for the likes of NDTV, Channel 4. And somehow in the midst of all these interviews, I caught the eye of the BBC. And they approached me and said that they would like to do a documentary on me and my achievements. And they asked me what I like to do and what my hobbies were. And I gave them two answers. I said, I like to code and I want to help people. And when this documentary started filming and when I started working on this project, I was about 12 years old. And as a 12-year-old, I tried my best to make a difference in people's lives. With my limited skill set, with my limited influence and connections, I tried to help my community in whatever way I could. And I ended up developing an app called Special, which helps people who suffer from allergies find restaurants near them which cater for their needs. So it helps them filter it easily and find the restaurants. And this I made as a non-profit. So any money I got from advertising or the app would go back into the app itself to try and make it the best it could be. And I think this kind of want to help our community, this intrinsic kind of need, is something which our culture truly highlights, especially Kashmiri Pandit culture. And I think kind of helping community is not limited in any way. We haven't put the word community in any sort of box. So whether that be helping the Kashmiri Pandit community, I live in the UK, so whether that's helping British community, or even kind of the Indian community, it's everywhere we go. And something I say to a lot of people is that after the 7 exoduses that Kashmiri Pandits have had to face, especially after 1990, something all of our parents were a part of and have faced firsthand, being refugees in one's own country, I feel like any other group would feel some form of resentment towards a country which, allowed them to lose their home, lose their culture, and lose family members as well. But one thing I love about the Kashmiri Pandit community is that हम गर्व से कहते हैं, हम सर उठाकर कहते हैं कि हम हिंदुस्तानी हैं, हम कश्मीरी हैं और हम हिंदुस्तानी हैं. And that is something that I have taken on board as well. And I've always kept that sentiment with me, and I've tried to help the Indian community wherever I can as well. So there's an amazing charity in India called Prajwala, who rescue, rehabilitate, and prevent sex trafficking of women in India. And this is something that really resonated with me, and I really, truly wanted to help these group of people in whichever way I could, and make my contribution. So I've given many lectures on their work. I've fundraised money for them. And I think this is an example of true kind of Kashmiri Pandit culture in the essence, is taking something you truly believe in and help a community. And I think the fact that the Kashmiri Pandit community has always helped me and has always encouraged me to do whatever I can, no matter how kind of small I am, how insignificant I think I am, to help a community. I think that has been my key motivation and truly encouraged me.
How do you think that the community we're part of has influenced you to focus on the arenas that you do work in?
I think the struggles of the Kashmiri Pandit community have really influenced me by putting things into perspective, kind of what really matters and what is kind of superficial in one way, shape, or form. So I had the amazing opportunity to actually hear lots and lots of stories firsthand. So when Vivekji came to the UK to do research on Kashmiri Pandits for his film, The Kashmir Files, um, I was able to volunteer and was able to really get an experience by hearing Kashmiri Pandits, my own community, people who have literally raised me, tell their own stories and explain their struggles. And it was one whole week of literally 15 hours a day, just hearing their stories and being absolutely amazed by what they've been through and still how grateful they are, what position they're at, and how they've bounced back. Um, a lot of people were telling stories about how they were in Jagti camps and they were still prioritizing their education. Their parents were doing whatever they could to fund college, fund school. And they were also helping each other. Despite having so little, they were all making sure that, you know, their neighbor was okay. They were sharing rooms when there really wasn't enough space. And I think from them, I have taken, and from that experience, I have taken two core values of education and pursuing education, and helping your community. Because if they can do it in the darkest moments with the privileges that we have, we can definitely choose these values and adopt them into our own lives.
Kashmea, what ventures do you plan on pursuing in the future? Do you want to focus on academic advancements, or do you want to focus on the work that you're doing to help people, or maybe innovation and technology?
I think I would like to definitely do kind of a mixture of all three. I believe that academics is something, you know, we have to pursue. Kind of ignorance is, you know, I don't believe in the concept of ignorance is bliss. I think, you know, we want to pursue education. As we've said, you know, Kashmiri Pandits, we're scholars, and that might be kind of intrinsic in our blood. So academics is a route I definitely want to see how successful I can be in. I think innovation and technology in our generation is the way to go. I think if you have that, then you're able to offer a lot. And I think we can measure no matter what financial success you achieve. I think true success is when you remember your roots, your culture, people who have given you the ethics and the values. And I definitely want to make a significant contribution to my community and help the people who have helped me. And I think that's something that, you know, a lot of us do think about as well, because I know you yourself, Anousha, have your own non-profit. So how did you go about starting this venture?
Well, ever since I was very young, I had a desire to help people. So I tried the conventional way to help people. I've volunteered, I've joined clubs, debate clubs, politics, all that stuff. But none of it really worked for me because people always want to do things based per their own agenda. And there's always a hidden reason behind every goal, every venture. And I decided that the work other people were putting me to wasn't the work that I wanted to contribute personally to the world. So I decided to come up with a year or a 2-year plan of how I can bring education to low income communities in the city that I go to school in. I go to school in Newark, and their public education system isn't the greatest. There's high dropout rates and high crime rates. And I got to thinking, you know, living in the suburbs and growing up in the suburbs, we always had tutors, we always had SAT prep, and we always had resources that can help us take our our goals to that next level, to actually help us do the things that we set out on doing. But for a lot of low-income kids, their dreams seem like a pipe dream because they feel like they're stuck in the environment that they're in. So I wanted to bring a lot of those same resources that I grew up in to a community where they didn't have those same resources growing up.
What inspired you and what motivated you to start a nonprofit instead of, say, a profit?
Well, I do want to start my own for-profit business or company someday, but I also want to show the world that you don't need to have Bill Gates money to be able to help people. You can help people out of your own bedroom. You can help people out of your college dorm. You don't need to already be super, super successful in order to share the wealth with people, because wealth isn't money. Wealth is a state of mind. Wealth is knowing that you can have an impact on people through your words and your actions and your mentality instead of money. Money isn't the only resource that's out there. And if you really come up with a vision, executing it doesn't take wads of cash. Executing it takes courage and resilience, which is something that I have definitely inherited from those who came before me. So I'm super grateful to be part of this community.
And apart from philanthropy, what other hobbies or interests do you have?
Well, just like a lot of you guys, I'm a lover of the arts. I can't really draw or paint like Pearl and Medha, but I do love appreciating art. I'm the type of person who, when I go to an art museum, I need to stand in front of each and every single painting, think about it in my head, read the description. I'm not the person that just looks at a painting and I'm like, oh, that's pretty, okay, let's move on. No, like I will sit there and I'll be like, what is this saying to me? Like, how is this painting speaking to me right now? I also love music. I grew up in a household where music has always been something that everybody takes part of. My mom sings, my dad also sings, he plays guitar. He was in a rock band in college. I sing. I don't play any instruments because I feel like that takes like a whole other kind of dedication and skill that I'm not really ready to pursue yet, but I sing, I write poetry, songs, and I love appreciating other people's work. When Medha and Pearl show their paintings, I know I had like kind of like a fake smile on my face, but no, I was really appreciating your visions, and I could really understand what you guys were trying to portray through your art, and I was really thinking about that deeper intention that you guys were trying to pull out of your art.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So we're gonna end this with a song. Krisha, I know that you have another song that you've prepared for us, and we would love to end the show with that.
तो मैं जो अभी एक कश्मीरी गाना गाने जा रही हूँ, वो जो हमारी कश्मीर की बहुत ही माननीय गायिका हैं कैलाश मेहरा जी, उनका है गाना कर सम्यो न्याय अंदे। मुझे उम्मीद है आप सबको ये पसंद आएगा। कर सम्यो न्याय अंदे मार वंदे मदन भरो कर सम्यो न्याय अंदे मार वंदे मदन भरो कर सम्यो न्याय झुंड मकर बनी बनिया हमनो वफादारो झुंड मकर बनी बनिया हमनो वफादारो कुछ हम रोठ करे मदे मदन वारो कुछ हम रोठ करे मदे मदन वारो कर सम्यो न्याय दे शब क्यों ये तुम यार म्याने सितम गारो शब क्यों ये तुम यार म्याने सितम गारो रोश दीदार तुम मदे मदन वारो रोश दीदार तुम मदे मदन वारो कर सम्यो न्याय दे Thank you.
Thank you. And once again, I would like to thank the Global Kashmiri Pandit Diaspora, and I would like to thank I Am Buddha for giving us this platform and giving us this opportunity to speak from the heart and soul about our culture and everything that it means to us. Thank you for joining me on this panel today, ladies, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day.